I love Dragon Ball, and so does everyone else. With Daima being surprisingly good and Sparking Zero taking over everyone's feed, it seems this is the best time to talk about Dragon Ball Z. So let's get to it. But what should we talk about? Dragon Ball is a franchise that has spread throughout many mediums, varying from anime, manga, games, and the subject of today's video, films. No, not that one. But anyways, I was more so thinking the original 13 Dragon Ball motion pictures, released during the 90s, from Dead Zone to Wrath of the Dragon. These films compose most of, if not the most, iconic moments in the entire franchise, even though ironically enough they're not really a part of the main storyline, but very notably this hasn't stopped their influence from leaking into canon, with Broly and Bardock being the most prominent examples of this mindset. But with that being said, this version of Goku not being canon makes him a little bit more interesting to power scale, so why not attempt to do so? As today, I will be scaling the Goku from the movie timeline. Is he stronger than his canon Z counterpart, or is he weaker? Let's find out, as we will analyze his power from each film to determine how strong he is per arc. We got over a dozen films to cover, so I implore you guys to please subscribe. This video is going to take a pretty long time to produce, and I pull a lot of care into these videos, and if you like them, then feel free to subscribe. It's free, and I'm always going to bless your feed with content such as this. We're working with 2 to 4 shorts a week and a main video like this every week, so you're going to get your subs worth. Oh, and here's another thing. The movies have a weird habit of referencing characters that are in the main Z anime, usually to kind of set the power bar for these movie villains. Like for example, a lot of the earlier films will be like, this character is stronger than Frieza, but people will use the excuse that this isn't the canon Z timeline to say that they're only referencing a weaker Frieza, who has no feats and stuff like that. Like, I know people who unironically say that Cooler is weaker than Frieza because anime Frieza blows up Namek to a soul system level degree. Oh, spoilers by the way. But they'll say things like, prove movie Frieza blew up Planet Namek as hard as he did in the anime. Just a whole bunch of chicanery. In my opinion, these are Dragon Ball Z movies, so what other versions of the characters would they be referring to? We have statements that say verbatim that say just because these films aren't canon doesn't mean that they're disconnected from the storyline, as they advanced on plot threads from the anime and reveal things that could have been. And for people who really gooed on the numerous timeline discrepancies, Koyama has stated that these films were produced ahead of time, and they had to deal with concepts that hadn't even been explored in the anime yet. So trying to attack their linking to canon via this front is kinda as they weren't really familiar with what they had to work with. So when blatant comparisons are made like this, then I will be using canon, because that's obviously what they're trying to get across. Like, imagine you made a Dragon Ball Z film, and then you made a villain, and then you had a statement where, like, he's stated to be stronger than Beerus. As the author of that story, it's pretty clear you're trying to convey something about this new character. So that's just the way that I'm gonna approach this video. As when direct comparisons are made, I will be taking into account the shown versions of the characters and explore what that would mean for these new movie villains. Oh, another thing, I will also be scaling movie Goku with the interpretation that all of the movies take place in a single timeline, as Koyama, the writer of each and every Dragon Ball Z movie, has stated that he wrote the films with that interpretation, and Akira Toriyama himself has stated that they take place in a different dimension being singular. There's also the fact that the movies have a nice habit of just referencing each other, so there's that as well. I guess as a Godzilla fan, I'm just more accepting of things like inconsistent physical appearances and numerous timeline discrepancies. But just in case you don't like that, I'm gonna label this video as a composite movie Goku scaling, so the people who really disagree don't debunk this video in the comments. And I suggest you check out my homies Numbers and Long's takes, as they have covered the movies and their subsequent scaling from this more skeptical based point of view. But as for me,
I'm gonna do my own thing.
So with that in mind, just consider this a composite movie Goku scale. We have 13 movies to cover, so let's dive into our first film era. Alright, firstly you have Dead Zone, which has some pretty interesting scaling, so let's just get into it. And essentially at best, unweighted Goku is able to injure and fight on par with Giga Garlic Jr. Though he's not getting him like critically injured, the fact that he can start to press him a little bit and fight on par with him would imply a somewhat relative power level, though he does downscale. This is important as Garlic Jr. even in base form has a power level of around 1450. This is consistent as he's able to beat up Kami, a character who has a power level of 220. Meaning at worst, he would upscale feats such as Roshi's infamous Moonbust, which gets into the large planetary ranges. But as for the green guy's own feats, he's the one who recreated the moon from scratch after Roshi blew it up, which surprisingly is a dwarf star level plus feat, as he just made it from nothing. And a base Garlic Jr. can press him and beat him, meaning that Goku and Piccolo at worst would get into the small star level ranges, as they scale to a much stronger Garlic Jr. But as for much more specific stuff, Garlic Jr. in this Giga state is stated to have grown in power many tens of times over, which at worst would mean he's 30 times stronger. Using basic math now, this would mean Garlic Jr. would have a power level of over 43,000. Unfortunately though, due to Goku only really starting to press him while unweighted and having Piccolo's help on top of that, would mean that it's very unlikely that his power level at this point is that high. So to be safe, I think by Dead Zone anyways, just due to the fact that he was able to press someone with someone's help who was over 2 times stronger than Vegeta, I think it's fair enough to say that at worst movie 1 Goku would have a power level of around 10 to 20,000, meaning that he would upscale canon feats such as this, which yeah is also dwarf star level. And as for speed, he would possess FTL to MFTL plus combat speeds and reaction time due to him being much stronger than the character known as King Kai, who was able to perceive and track Goku's ship while flying in space at over 1 trillion times the speed of light. Dragon Ball Z speed scaling is pretty funny pretty early, so I'm not really gonna mention it that much until like the important things start to just stack on top of each other. So just remember the dwarf star level AP. Oh yeah, I forgot the Dead Zone. I literally wasn't gonna even mention this, but basically there's a whole lot of super wank with this place, as it's stated to be a super slash hyperspace, which at worst would make it a 4D to 5th dimensional construct, and it's also stated to be infinite. And apparently Garlic Jr. created the freaking space. So wait, is movie Goku stronger than his current Dragon Ball Super counterpart just in his first appearance alone? Well, not really, as Koyama, the writer of the film, has gone on to clarify that Garlic Jr. doesn't know what he's talking about, and that he didn't really intend us to take this, piece of lore literally. It doesn't mean anything. And he also didn't create the space as well, so yeah, he wouldn't even scale to begin with. In World's Strongest, nothing really notable happens except for some more consistency. Goku at this point has grown a decent chunk stronger, as he's implied to have gone through his King Kai training, as he now knows moves such as the Genki Dama and the Kaioken, which he can utilize to a ×3 degree. While in this state and unweighted, he can break chunks up and just overpower Dr. Wheelo, who has a power level of 39,000. So Goku being able to just tussle with him would also grant him relative AP and power level pretty much. And it would go a pretty long way in supporting the previously established 10 to 20k range for his base power level, though perhaps at this point it's probably closer to around 20,000. But with Kaioken, he'd fully be above Dr. Wheelo and above Garlic Jr. as well. Oh, and I forgot, the Mad Doctor's beam that Goku overpowered in this instance was capable of destroying the planet Earth. So yep, that's some more consistency. In Tree of Might now, we know Goku has gotten much stronger, as verbatim he has a power level of around 30,000, and he's capable of utilizing the Kaioken to a 10 to 20 times degree, depending if you're watching the dub or not. Meaning in Tree of Might alone, at worst Goku would be stronger than any of the canon Ginyu Force members, and at best he'd be stronger than even First Form Frieza, though this is when he's using Kaioken, I want to make note of that. But even then, he also has a stronger moves such as the Spirit Bomb, which was able to decimate Turles after he ate from the Tree of Might. This is where the First Form Frieza stuff starts to get consistent, as Turles' minions alone believe that if they ate the fruit's power, Frieza would be light work. This sentiment becomes consistent as Turles himself, after eating from the fruit, is able to stomp out Goku while utilizing 10 to 20 times Kaioken, who we have established would be in similar ranges if not just superior to First Form Frieza. And yeah, I know the minions said they would be stronger than Frieza period, but I'm only talking about First Form, as a lot of the greater universe wasn't even aware of the fact that he could transform even one time. So, but this is okay, as First Form Frieza with a pinky was able to destroy Planet Vegeta. That's some pretty casual dwarf to large star level AP just there alone. But now we have to talk about some of the film timeline's detractors, as they will point out this pamphlet which I've been using to assert that movie timeline Frieza only has a power level of 85,000. But one, this is likely a suppressed First Form Frieza, as the anime that this pamphlet is promoting and in continuity with would later go on to state that yes, he has a power level of 530,000, but if you really want to be goofy about it, then fine, we can be goofy about it, as movie Frieza's destruction of the planet Vegeta is actually the strongest during the events of Cooler's Revenge, as we see the blast actually make it out to where Cooler was, who was notably a couple of planets away. So either we can just agree that movie Frieza likely has a power level of 530,000, as Koyama said that the films are following on the canon continuity, or I can get equally as goofy and just say that movie dimension power levels are quantified much differently, and a power level of 85k is enough to destroy a solar system in the movie timeline, whereas in the Z anime you'd have to have a power level of the tens of millions to even begin to compare to that level. So seeing as how we can play goofy, let's just agree to play ball. So with that tangent done and over with, we can finally talk about Goku's AP at this point in time. In base, he would likely be in the star level ranges, as he would have a power level of 30,000 and he'd upscale Vegeta from the Saiyan Saga, who could do this. But but at best, he would possess solar system AP, as he would be relative to just stronger than first form Frieza, who could do this. So for comparison's sake, seeing as how this is the Saiyan Saga-esque era for the movies, as Vegeta isn't really prominent yet and there's no Super Saiyans around, this Goku would easily stomp out his canon Saiyan Saga counterpart, as he's almost 4 times stronger in base alone. But with that being said, we can move into the next era of the Z movies and see if the sentiment is consistent there. Moving on to the Namek/Frieza Saga equivalent for this film era, and we have to start off with none other than Lord Slug. As weird as it sounds, the movie clearly takes place before Namek, but after the Saiyan Saga. So why are most of the Z fighters still alive? Once again, here's a statement that essentially boils down to,
Don't think about it!
Goku knows Kaioken and Genki Dama, and King Kai starts to make more references to Frieza, and in the film he says that he's never seen a Super Saiyan before, so it's for this reason that I think it's clear that this is before the Namek Saga. We don't get too much for Goku, as he doesn't even really start to really scale to Lord Slug without amping himself drastically. This is exemplified in his pseudo Super Saiyan form, which is stated to be like a regular Super Saiyan, so it's fair enough to say that it would grant him the same 50 times multiplier, stacking that on top of his Tree of Might base, and that would grant him a power level of around 1.5 million. Goku apparently in this film is also stated to know the Kaioken times 100, so that would make his peak power around 3 million. And that's really all I got to say on that one, as I feel a lot of the statements that get Slug above Frieza are probably in reference to his first form, as Goku hasn't become a true Super Saiyan yet according to King Kai, so it's fair enough to say that the climactic battle on Namek hasn't happened yet. Moving on to Cooler's Revenge now, and this is the start of a lot of very interesting inverse developments, as despite what a lot of headcanons like to assert, this is still the Z timeline, so I don't want to hear anyone say this is an alternate timeline where Goku beat Frieza with the Spirit Bomb, as even the Daizenshu puts this film after Trunks' arrival. But with that being said, this is the first movie to be fully set after the Namek Saga, so Goku has presumably gone through his Zenkais and training and such, so he's much stronger than he's ever been. So when Cooler says things like he can see how a base Goku could have defeated his brother, a character who was aware of Frieza's final form as well, and that would grant Goku's current power level in base upwards to around 120 million, which is 4,000 times his power level in Lord Slug, and this would also grant Goku multi-solar system level AP in base alone, upscaling him off of Frieza's destruction of the planet Namek. Cooler then infamously transforms into his next state, which is reaffirmed by guides and Goku himself to be above Frieza. Cooler in this form would go on to casually dominate Goku utilizing the Kaioken times 20, putting his power level at worst around 2 billion. Goku himself would then eventually become a Super Saiyan and multiply his power times 50 and have a power level equivalent to 6 billion. From here, Goku would subsequently dominate Cooler and defeat him. Note how I say he didn't kill him, as he would pull a William Afton and come back in a new metal shell as well, as this film most likely takes place in the 3 years between Goku's return from Yardrat and the Android Saga, and as a result of that, subsequently the use of power levels would just kind of end here. So from here, we're just going to talk about feats and statements, so let's just get into that. After being powered up by the Big Yeti Star, Metacooler is stronger than he was before. This is pretty self-evident, as he's able to take on Goku and Vegeta while they're in their Super Saiyan forms. But by the end of the film is where we truly get to see how powerful Goku is at this point in time, as when he's hooked up directly to the Big Yeti Star, he's able to overpower it with his energy, which is stated to be bottomless and infinite. Keep in mind the Big Yeti Star is a construct so powerful that it itself could generate verbatim endless copies of Metacooler, so that would be infinite power that it would harness, and then Goku in Super Saiyan 1 before even the Android Saga could generate enough energy to overload this construct, granting Goku by movie 6 infinite power on a 3rd dimensional scale or high universal attack potency. And frankly, that's where his scaling kind of caps for a decent chunk of the movie timeline, but for fun, I'll have a kind of lightning round and just go over some of the more notable feats that aren't quite as impressive as this, but have some ramifications for how strong he gets throughout the films. Super Android 13 has no feats, but due to Koyama's own statements, we can assert that he'd be unquantifiably stronger than Metacooler, so still around high uni. But I guess for some little neat thing now, Goku can absorb the Spirit Bomb into himself and use that power to punch Super Android 13, so that's neat I guess. But for actual feats now, you have Broly busting galaxies, which Goku would objectively scale to, as he can fight on par with the Broly who performed this feat. And Broly, once he would ascend into his legendary Super Saiyan status form, is referenced to have infinite power and a threat great enough to destroy the Dragon Ball Z universe, which is stated to be infinite on numerous occasions. Goku will later get a 1000 times power amp in order to finally bring Broly down, so Goku in Super Saiyan 1 by this point, downscaling someone with infinite power by any quantifiable measure would still grant Goku high uni AP. But this film is also where the speed of the verse is bumped up as well, as Broly, as previously mentioned, was a threat to the entire Dragon Ball Z universe, and seeing as how he does it one quadrant at a time, and this would mean that Broly would be able to destroy an infinite universe and its innumerable stars and galaxies over time, which would grant Broly infinite speed, as Broly would require speed to traverse distances that cease to just be distance because they lack quantifiable ends. And as funny as it sounds, Goku being even a trillion or a billion times slower and weaker than someone with high uni AP and infinite speed would still grant Goku that same level of stats. So yeah, Goku being 1000 times weaker than Broly in this film doesn't really mean anything. As for the next couple of films now, he's dead, but in BoJack Unchained, his only feat is punching out BoJack, who's probably stronger than Broly due to Koyama's own logic. This is consistent as, like Broly, BoJack is a character who was implied to be able to destroy the 4 quadrants of the universe over time, like Broly did, so Goku being able to drop him with a single punch in base could possibly kind of imply that Goku got 1000 times stronger in base alone. As for the second Broly movie now, there's once again really nothing. I mean, there's a family Kamehameha, but the film is pretty ambiguous as to if that was Goku or not. But either way, Goku would upscale, as during this time period, it's stated that Goku is the strongest in the universe, which would put him above this stronger Broly too. This sentiment is also consistent with Bio Broly, as Goku's only scaling here is defeating Broly down in hell. I want to note that bro isn't even sweating him or anything, and seeing as how Goku's around in the next film being Fusion Reborn, it's safe to say that he won that encounter. So either way you look at it, Goku in the movie timeline is above Broly. Trust me, we'll get to Koyama's own statements later. But with that being said, we can move on to the 2 final films in the movie timeline. I'm going to go over Wrath of the Dragon first, as there's a now deleted source that asserts that Janemba is stronger than her regard, so I might as well go over him first, and there's not really much. There's a statement that says that he was a threat to the universe, which would grant him at least multi-galactic attack potency, but seeing as how he should upscale most of the other movie villains, he should have high uni AP and infinite speed by default. Moving on to Fusion Reborn now, Super Saiyan 3 Goku's best stuff comes from his scaling to Janemba, as even as a fat yellow blob, he stated to have ki that Goku's never felt before, and he's also stated verbatim just to be stronger than Majin Buu. What Buu this statement is referring to is pretty confusing, but seeing as how later on in the film Vegeta knows about the fusion technique, meaning that this should be after the Buu saga, as confusing as that sounds, so this statement would get Janemba above even Buuhan, who was infamously going to destroy the macrocosm over time by slamming dimensions on top of each other until the whole thing would just blow up, which would grant Buuhan and Janemba by extension low multiversal attack potency. This is consistent as Janemba stated to be the strongest Z Goku enemy, and for the Broly tards, I found a statement that says that the Broly film is in the same continuity as Fusion Reborn, so Janemba would be stronger than Broly as well. Just had to get that out the way. Goku's able to fight on par with Fat Janemba, and just by transforming, he performs probably his best feat, as he was able to shake the Heaven planet from hell, Heaven being as big as the known universe, which is stated to be infinite, and he was also able to shake a mansion which had a universe inside of it. So Goku's casual Super Saiyan 3 aura was just shaking multiple space times. This is consistent as Goku has stated that the afterlife has a different, source of space time, or it has no flow time at all. So using that latter interpretation, this would grant Goku low multiversal attack potency and anywhere from infinite to inaccessible speed. So how strong would movie Goku be at the end of the day? Well, due to inverse, Janemba is stronger than Majin Buu, who Z Goku was relative to, meaning that a comp Z movie Goku would be stronger than his canon Z counterpart by the end of the day. This video is a little shorter than I expected, so I'm going to show you guys one more wank high-end meta for movie Goku. It's kind of funny. Should you use it? Probably not. And it's for the Broly tards, as Koyama has stated that Broly can beat anyone from the Z anime and even Dragon Ball GT, right? Which is insane work. And I also found another statement from some random French guidebook that said that Broly could beat Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, which is just another insane statement. And as I've pointed out, there are many ways to get Goku above Broly by the end of the Z movie timeline. So if you want to wank, then you can do that. I think it's kind of funny that movie Goku could potentially be stronger than anyone in GT. Do I think that personally? Would I argue it personally? No, this part is just for fun. Alright, so with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was a blast going back to all these Dragon Ball Z movies from my childhood and finding out how strong they were. Did any of these scaling chains surprise you, or was this about what you expected? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. But as always, I'll see you guys next week, but until then, stay bitchy, fans.